Welcome back to This Week in Auburn Sports. I'm Plainsman sports editor Eric Wallace.
And I'm Plainsman assistant sports editor Kyle Van Fechtmann.
After last week's rout of LSU in Jordan-Hare Stadium 41-7, the Auburn Tiger football team will take to the road this weekend for possibly the biggest game in Mississippi State history when number 2 Auburn takes on number 3 Mississippi State. The Bulldogs have never been rated this high, Kyle, and with a quarterback like Dak Prescott, it's hard for the Bulldog faithful not to be excited.
Yeah, definitely. As you said, Dak Prescott, he's been killing it this year, and he's actually, in many people's eyes, a Heisman frontrunner. But you can't forget about Nick Marshall after his best performance against LSU last week when he put up numbers. And him against Dak is going to be a big matchup that potentially, after the game, could have a Heisman frontrunner after that game. And it'll be interesting to see if Dak and Nick will continue to keep their running numbers up. And as Dak, he had 5 touchdowns against Texas A&M last week. So it'll be interesting to see how those 2 players match up and which quarterback wins that battle.
Absolutely. And the Bovada betting services that comes out with the betting odds for these Heisman races currently has Dak Prescott as second overall with Nick Marshall in a close third. They're both trailing the beast Todd Gurley over at Georgia. But really, it's pretty rare to get a matchup like this with 2 quarterbacks who have played as well as they have in Dak Prescott and Nick Marshall. It's going to be interesting to see how Dak deals with the spotlight because the nation's looking at him, and he hasn't been on this stage before. When Nick Marshall, who sometimes does fly under the radar, he definitely has been last year.
Yeah.
A little bit of a different matchup that's going to be pretty important is the Auburn run game versus the very athletic Mississippi State defensive line, which has really shown massive improvement this year, and is one of the reasons that they were able to slow down that Texas A&M offense last week. But it's going to, the Auburn offense burst out against LSU. We saw a little bit more of what we saw at the end of the year last year with Nick Marshall and Trey Mason. We saw it a little bit with Cameron Artis-Payne. So I really think that that's going to be key for Auburn is getting that run game started early because it really seems like once they get started, they don't really stop very often.
But you can't forget about Auburn's defense. They've been, as you were saying, the offense, they've been getting a lot of attention, obviously, rightfully so, as they went off against LSU. But Auburn's defense has held opponents to only 24 points in the second half of every game, which is pretty crazy. And the more impressive stat is they have 18 consecutive failed third down attempts. With LSU, they were 0 for 13 on third down attempts. So that just shows how Auburn's defense continues to step up and they continue to play under pressure.
Absolutely. And that second half stat you threw out, I think that speaks a lot towards Ellis Johnson's strategy of rotating defensive linemen because as you see usually in the second half, most teams wear down. But Ellis Johnson rotates so many bodies along the defensive line that even once later in the game, because offensive linemen, they stay in the game the whole time. It's the same 5 the whole time. Johnson's throwing out Gabe Wright, Montrevious Adams, Elijah Daniel, Ben Bradley, all those bodies. Eventually, they just wear down those offensive lines. And you saw that a little bit in the Arkansas game when they held Alex Collins and Jonathan Williams to just 2 yards rushing in the second half. So I think that's a big part of the Auburn defense's massive improvement in 2014.
It just shows how well they respond to Coach Johnson's halftime adjustments. As you said in the Arkansas game, that was a huge adjustment, but every second half of each game this year, they continue to respond to those adjustments.
Absolutely. So you're kind of struggling in Plainsman picks, so you're not in it this week.
I know.
But you got a prediction for the game in Starkville this weekend?
I think Auburn is going to pull out a victory, as you were saying. Dak Prescott and Mississippi State, they've never been in this situation. This is the biggest game in their history, and game days in town. And Auburn, last year alone, was in at least 3 games of this caliber. And this year, with Nick Marshall and all those players returning, I think it's just going to be too much for Mississippi State. I don't have a score prediction, but I think Auburn's going to come out on top.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. I think that it's Auburn's got to be the favorite going in just because of the experience. And I think, once they're on that stage, there may be a lot of emotions running high on a pretty inexperienced Mississippi State team. I think the experience of Auburn, especially after going to Kansas State earlier this year, is really going to be crucial for pulling out a victory. But it's not all football around here. The basketball team started off practice last week. Nothing too, exciting came out of Bruce Pearl's first practice and press conference of the fall. But a couple of quick notes. Sophomore center Matthew Atewe is slowly recovering. He said he's close to 100%, according to Pearl. Not quite there. They don't know if he'll be ready by the beginning of the season. So he and Simeon Bowers, who transferred in from junior college, probably will play the 5 center position, at least at the beginning of the season.
Yeah, the lineup's definitely looking different, though, from last year. So
A big change that I think is the starting point guard from last year, Todd Shamsuddin, is moving to the 2.
Yeah.
And I've talked to some players on the team, and they think that he's going to play a little bit of a role similar to Irving Walker from Florida a couple years ago.
Yeah.
Just he's a shorter guy, but he's just very bouncy, very fast, and he can get his shot when he wants to from outside.
Yeah.
But that leaves a hole at the point guard position where Malcolm Canada and Casey Ross Miller.
Yeah. So someone's going to have to step up and fill that void, as you're saying.
Absolutely. And I think one player that Auburn fans should keep an eye out for is a walk-on in Patrick Kahn. I haven't seen a lot of him, but from the little that I've seen of him, he looks like a college basketball player. He's very sharp. He's very quick. His passes are sharp in the little practices that we've seen. So that's just a name to keep an eye on for Auburn fans moving forward. Moving on to other sports, Kyle, what's volleyball up to this weekend?
Volleyball hits the road again. At Friday, they're playing against Missouri, and Sunday they're playing at Kentucky at 11 a.m., and that game is on SEC Network if any of you Auburn fans want to watch the volleyball team playing at Kentucky. So they're not at home, but they got 2 big road games to try to improve their SEC record.
Mm-hmm. And the men's and women's golf teams, they'll begin tournaments over this weekend. Women's golf is taking part in the Tar Heel Invitational, while the men's golf team will be taking part in the Sagamore Preview up in Indiana. So keep an eye on that, Auburn fans. If you happen to be around campus and you want to pick up an Auburn Plainsman, you definitely should. We have some good features this week on Auburn icons David Housel and Buddy Davidson. Our staff did a really good job with those. Buddy Davidson's been to 660 straight games, and I'm assuming he's going to Starkville this weekend.
He'll be there.
Make it 661. So make sure you check that out. Additionally, the Fall Fashion tab has come out this week. As you can see, Ron's getting some ideas.
Getting some new suit ideas.
Yeah, I mean, that suit's just kind of dingy and old. Like, he's just had it for so long.
Yeah.
But I feel like he's getting a lot out of it. He seems to be enjoying the articles and not the pictures. But yeah, so make sure you pick up the fashion tab this week. Other than that, that's all we got for this week in Auburn Sports. We'll see you next week.